So let's talk about the brand new Microsoft Xboxes because Microsoft just gave us more information on the Series S and the Series X. But let's first start off by talking about the Series S just because prior to this, we really didn't know any information on the Series S other than the fact that we knew the Series S was in production and it was going to be a real console. Now we practically know everything about this console. First off, let's talk about the design of this console. And personally, coming from me, I'm not really a big fan of the design of this thing. Of course, it is more about the functionality rather than the design. And as long as it plays games, of course, that's all that matters at the end of the day. But for me, there's just something off about it. I think it has to do to the fact that the console is all white, which would be okay. But the problem here is the grill for the heat exhaust is a black. And since the grill is black on the front, it really doesn't vibe well with me. And it really is sticking out like a sore thumb. And that's something I'm not a big fan of. And I think some people may agree with me on that. It's just not a great design. I wish they would have made the grill on this thing white, just like the console, so it would blend in. But since it doesn't blend in, it really looks weird. That's just me. I don't think this Series S is as aggressive as, like, let's say, for instance, the PS5. The PS5 is way more aggressive. It's way more different, but this one's not too different. At least the design of this is all simple shapes. We got a rectangle box, and then we have a circle for the heat exhaust, and that's not really a bad thing. Now, when it comes to the actual console itself, it looks like a lot of rumors were floating around what the price was going to be. A lot of people said 200, maybe 299, but either way, it turns out the console right now is going to cost you 299, and I honestly think that's actually a pretty good price point. That's also competing with the regular Nintendo Switch. It's still competing with current gen. Whenever current gen decides to die, of course, those will eventually go away. But overall, I think 299 is a perfect price for this thing. I think Microsoft knows that they got to make a little money and they got to make the consumers happy. And I think at 299, that's really a sweet spot for this console. Honestly, I don't think Microsoft could have actually made this console $200 because if you look at all the parts, all the manufacturing, just everything about this console, there's no way they could have made this $200. Of course, $200 would have been better for the consumer, but for Microsoft, they would have been taking too much of a hit here. So $299 isn't too bad at all. That's kind of like paying the same price as the current gen base consoles, whether you pick up the regular PS4 or a regular Xbox One S. I think this is, again, a very good price, and I think most people aren't going to be complaining about the price here. Sure, it would have been nice at like 250 or 200, but we'll take 299 here for this console. Now, the really interesting thing about the Series S is going to be the fact that the Series X is not going to have the same power as the Series S. The Series S is actually going to be a much more cheaper alternative to the Series X. So we're talking less power here. This thing is supposed to play games at above 1080p. It's supposed to play games at 1440p, which is equivalent to, I think, 2.5K, somewhere around there. So you can see you are getting better frame rates and better resolutions than current gen gaming. So that's actually a pretty good plus. And I honestly think for a lot of people out there who just want to save money or don't really care about graphics, but just want to play the latest and greatest titles from Microsoft and things like that, I think this is actually a very good console just to buy for $299. You get better frame rate, better graphics, better performance as a whole than current gen. You can play games in better quality. You can also play newer titles, which is actually great because, of course, it is running on the same architecture as the Series X, so it's in the same family, which is really nice. So that's actually a plus, that it's not just something that just stays at 1080p. I'm actually glad they decided to bump up the frame rates and bump up the resolution of the games over current gen with their cheap consoles. So it's not like you're getting current gen hardware here when with the Series S, which is actually nice. And I'm actually glad. And I think, again, for a lot of people, this is actually going to be a great console for those people who just want to play current or next gen games altogether. Now, one thing they did actually state about this console is the fact that this console is only going to have a 512 gigabyte internal SSD, and that's actually kind of a problem just due to the fact that one, they also confirmed that this console is actually going to have no disk drive apparently, so you're not going to be able to buy physical media for this thing. That is kind of the trade-off that you're going to be paying for $299. Of course, for me personally and honestly, it doesn't make sense to why this doesn't have a disk drive, just because disk drives are relatively inexpensive, and it's kind of, I wouldn't really say anti-consumer, but it's not that much expensive. But I guess they really wanted to give people a reason to upgrade to the Series X or the Series S. And at that point, I do get that. And I think for some people, they're okay with digital distribution. Of course, with next-gen games on the horizon, of course, next-gen games are going to be having more textures, more just everything. So overall, they're going to take more space on your SSD, of course, and on your drive, which is unfortunate. So 512 is pretty small, but at least the good news is with Microsoft, they did confirm that they are going to allow you to use those swappable SSDs that Microsoft does have planned for the Series X and the Series S. So that's great news. So it's not like you're just stuck with 512, and I think you can even take things a little bit further and actually use your own external hard drive or external SSD. But of course, you probably shouldn't, or I don't think they'll even allow you to play or put games on your external hard drive or external SSD, just because the performance is not the same as the little SSDs that Microsoft is going to be selling. But I'm actually pretty surprised that Microsoft said, yeah, we'll let those SSDs be usable on the upcoming Series S, because I guess, of course, 512 is obviously not enough. That's maybe 1, 2, or at most 3 games, since games are just so much storage nowadays. That's nice, you get that. Overall, I'm actually really happy that they actually decided to make this console. I think it appeals to a lot of people. I think $299 is a very good price for this console, especially when you look at the competition. You look at something like the PS5, and the PS5 is taking a whole different approach with their console, with what Sony wants to do with it. Basically, how it's going to work is you're going to get 2 systems, but they're going to be having the same power. And since they're going to have the same power, the cheaper alternative is not going to be much more cheaper than the expensive one. You're only going to save like $50 to $100, because the cheaper PS5 is only going to have no disk drive in it. That's really the only difference between the regular PS5 and the cheaper alternative PS5. And if they were to do that, that does mean, of course, that one is actually going to be a little bit more expensive than the Xbox Series X, because it's using the same power as the regular PS5, of course. So that's not good news. So Xbox Series X, Microsoft, I think, really is going to have it good this holiday season, just because they will have, I think, as far as I know, and I'm pretty sure, they'll have the cheapest console on the market for next-gen gaming. If you want an Xbox or just a next-gen console altogether, it will be the Xbox Series S, and that's actually really good because it gets people right away to upgrade really fastly. They don't feel like they're breaking the bank or anything like that with this Xbox Series S. So overall, a very cool console, Xbox Series X. Now, of course, let's go over to the Xbox Series X, because they did release more information on the upcoming Xbox Series X. And the Xbox Series X, we really didn't get any more information on what it is, because we already knew what this console already has to offer. Basically, we just got the price here. And the pricing of the Xbox Series X is actually going to be pretty good. It's probably better than what a lot of people were expecting. A lot of people were expecting like $600 or $700 for this console, because, of course, rumors were floating around that this thing would be pretty expensive when this thing came out. But lo and behold, they released the price of this thing, and the Series X is only going to cost $500. And honestly, I think $500, I wouldn't say is a sweet spot, but I wouldn't say it's overkill. I think for a lot of people, they're going to be okay with this system, but for a lot of people, they're not going to be okay. But I think for the vast majority of people who are looking at a game console, I don't think they'll be turned off by $500, just because you're getting a lot for $500. You do have to take in consideration, if you were to build a gaming PC for around the same price as the Series X, you also take in consideration how many other consoles in history have came out at that $500 price point, and it's not too unfamiliar that gamers have seen prices around $500 for game systems like the current Xbox One X. The Xbox One X this generation came out at $500. The base Xbox One came out at $500. I want to say the Xbox 360 came out at $500 as well. Either way, gamers are used to seeing $500 for game consoles. I mean, it's not the best pricing. Of course, obviously, I probably would have liked to seen at least $400 or $450 for that console, but $500 is not too bad. Once you go over $500, I think just for a game console, that's when people start to question it, even if the components and everything are worth the money. I think gamers just are used to not paying over 500, and at 500 it would have been a really tough sell even for the hardcore gamer. I think they would look elsewhere. Even if this thing is priced at 500 and people don't necessarily agree with that $500 price point, I think it is okay again, especially since they also have an Xbox Series S, and they are going to have other consoles on the market like Sony's PS5 console. So if you still want an Xbox, you can definitely go with the Xbox Series X or Xbox Series S, excuse me, to actually save a little bit more money and to get into next gen gaming, and it won't really feel like you're breaking the bank. And overall, I really do think that, again, Microsoft really hit it out of the park when it comes to both the Xbox Series S and the Xbox One X. I think they really found the sweet spot for both of these consoles, and I think for most people out there, no one's really going to gripe about the price points of these things. Sure, they are still expensive for what they are. I'm not going to claim that they are inexpensive, because when you have to pay for things like this, it's going to be expensive in the first place. But I think they really, again, hit it out of the park with the pricing. And this was the biggest thing that we were worried about, what the pricing was going to be. And I'm actually really glad that they came out and actually gave some good performance upgrades to the Series S. Instead of just making it a 1080p capable gaming machine, they decided to throw in 1440p gaming, which is, I think, again, 2.5K, a little bit more than 2K gaming. Clearly not the same as the Series X, which of course is capable of playing games at 4K, and in some situations you can play games at 120 frames per second with that console. So pretty nice from Microsoft, and I think Microsoft's going to have a really good holiday. I guess the only thing bad about these consoles, to be honest, it's not really the consoles itself. It's more about Microsoft's ecosystem with the Xbox, is the fact that Microsoft, at least in my opinion, and if you look at other people's opinions, I think agree, Microsoft kind of has some of the worst game lineup, at least if you compare them to Nintendo, and if you compare them to Sony, which Sony is more their competitor more than Nintendo, even though Nintendo makes game systems. I know a lot of people don't like comparing Nintendo to like Microsoft and Sony, because Sony and Microsoft make more games that are grittier, that play with better graphics, better resolution, so they always like to compare those two. But at the end of the day, they're still a gaming company. But either way, what I'm saying is that their lineup of games is kind of lackluster, at least compared to the competition. That's what I feel, and that's the only thing that Microsoft really needs to work on this generation for them to really be successful. Sure, they do have a benefit of having that Games Pass, and I think if you pay Games Pass for the Microsoft Xbox platform, you are going to be getting one heck of a deal. You'll be getting pretty much unlimited gaming, very cheap gaming at that. Overall, it's going to be a win-win scenario for you and both Microsoft. But just the fact, again, they don't really have good first-party support with their consoles is going to be a bummer. You look again at what Sony is doing with the PS5 and what Nintendo always does with their consoles. They always hit it out of the park, at least with first-party IPs and first-party exclusives. That's the only thing. But besides that, I think they really have two great choices for next-gen gaming. Again, the Series S and the Series X, and I think most people are going to be happy with that price. And I'm actually pretty excited here that these things are coming out sometime in winter 2020 or holiday 2020. And yeah, that's going to be it for this episode. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.